Hi, and thanks for tuning in to SOCMA's podcast, where I sit down for a fireside chat on current trends affecting the specialty chemical sector. I'm Jennifer Abrill, President and CEO of SOCMA. In this episode, I'm joined by Tom Myers, the newly appointed President and CEO of the Personal Care Products Council. Tom and I talk about the trends, happenings, and the outlook in the cosmetics, personal care, and beauty sector. Let's dive into it. Today, I'm talking with Tom Myers, who is the newly appointed President and CEO of the Personal Care Products Council, and someone I've had the pleasure of working with for a lot of years. So, Tom, congratulations to you. Very excited for you.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Jennifer.
Thanks for being with us today. Okay, so we want to know a bit about your vision and what you plan to do in your new role. And this is super exciting because both you and I have come from being staffers at our respective associations before we stepped into the leadership role. And so that can be a new, interesting, and exciting space to occupy. So tell us a little bit about your new role and how you plan to tackle it.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me here and speaking with me today. Happy to be here myself. And as for my new role, and officially my 5th day on the job.
Congratulations.
Right out of the box. I will say I understand the concept of drinking from a fire hose now. I think that it's been, certainly being on staff here, being familiar with the staff and the issues that we have faced as an industry is something that I think appealed to our search committee and our board. The idea that, I would hit the ground running with regard to the work that we do here and representing the beauty industry going forward. I think there was a lot of appeal there for the continuity. Not to mention that we have great staff here and have done a great job. My predecessor, Leslie Westing, really left me with a great group of people. And I don't think they wanted to upset the apple cart. And they also, I think, thought that I would bring some new leadership to the organization. There are a few things that I have in mind as far as what I plan to do. I want to make us more purpose-driven. I want to be much more member-centric, I guess, would be how I describe the approach. And talking to our members about how I can understand the pressures that they face in marketing their products and so forth, and how we can continue to deliver kind of exceptional experiences. So yes, it's been really, I didn't think it was going to be a real big change, but it certainly is. Moving from my prior role as general counsel into the C-suite, so to speak, has been a pretty big change. And there's a lot of responsibility that goes with the job, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, it comes at you fast, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
It's an experience. Well, that's actually really interesting because as you were going through 2023 and, as you're looking at what the future is for the beauty industry and as you're reflecting on your time and stepping into the role in 2023, how would you sum up the year for PCPC member companies? So, tell us, do you have any defining themes for the sector from last year, especially as you were going through your working with the board and the selection committee? I'm sure a lot of that came up.
Absolutely. Yes. I think that, looking back on the last year, there was a lot. I think if you had to look at key themes, I think science and safety have been kind of the key themes for this industry. Science, of course, being really the foundation for all that we do. It informs all of our advocacy, whether it's at the legislative, state or federal level, the regulatory level. It has to underpin everything that we do. So that's a very important theme. And nowhere was that more obvious than in the enactment of the Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act, or MOCRA, as we call it, back in December of 2022. So that was very important legislation. That's something that our industry has been working on for more than 10 years. So it's been a long time coming, but it's been landmark legislation that essentially revamped the entire way that FDA did their oversight of our sector, gave them enhanced regulatory tools to, work with product safety and promote innovation and things like that. And really a lot of 2023 was spent in the implementation of that. And our work has been trying to ensure that our companies understand what the law says and how they can comply with it. So there's been a lot going on there. And of course, that wasn't the end of the journey. We also have to, we've been up on Capitol Hill. This particular law did not have user fees. So we've been advocating for appropriations for FDA and trying to ensure that they have proper funding so they can properly implement the law, and it doesn't just, languish in any way. So a lot of that has been going on. And so safety and science, I say, would be the key themes. Other things that we've kind of looked back on in 2023, we've done a lot of work on trying to eliminate any need for animal testing in regard to personal care products and cosmetics. That's always something of interest to our members. And then I think, certainly I think a lot of sectors experience this, but during the pandemic, the rise of e-commerce and sales, online sales, really, there was a real growth in that area. And I think that's going to continue as more folks are shopping online for their beauty products and things, unlike, pre-pandemic. So we're going to see a continued growth in that area, I think. Yes, there are concerns because there are also, there's an opportunity for illicit trade and counterfeits and things like that to come through. And we've seen that, and those can be very damaging, not just to a business, but disregarding regulatory protections and threatening consumer safety and health. Those are real concerns for us. So we've been pushing things up on Capitol Hill. There's the Shop Safe Act and things like that that would put in some kind of best practices for e-retailers and how they approach things and filter out cosmetics and things like that. But overall, I think, as I said, safety is our focus, science is our focus, transparency is our focus. And I think that really came through last year, and hopefully will continue into the new year as well.
Yeah. And all the things that you mentioned, they have, of course, a domestic focus, but then they also have a global impact as well. Particularly when you talk about e-commerce, that changes the operating landscape and maybe some of the reach of, I know you have both domestic and international membership.
Sure.
So maybe that changes some of that, certainly the regulatory aspect of complying. But, as we end up last year, the beginning of this year, there's a lot of global turbulence happening. So do you focus on, and do your members watch some of these geopolitical and macroeconomic factors? What do you think we should be looking at and monitoring closely that will be indicative of what our businesses are going to need to focus on in 2024?
So that's a big question. Yes. And I can think of 10 things off the top of my head to think about on a global perspective. So 2023, yes, very turbulent year. There's 2 wars still ongoing. There's been global extremism politically. There's been legislative gridlock. There's a lot of different macroeconomic factors that can impact a company's operations and supply chains and strategies and all these things. So you really need to be prepared and monitoring a number of things. I'll give you some examples. Global economic growth, right? The health of the global economy is going to influence consumer spending. So demands for goods and services and investments and things like that. Trade policies and tariffs, right? Those directly affect the cost of goods and the supply chains and market access. So you want to keep an eye on those things. Currency fluctuations that impacts the cost of imports and exports. Also companies, if they're sourcing materials internationally, you need to monitor any fluctuations in the currency or movements to hedge against any risks there. Political instability is a pretty obvious one that is going to impact you. Supply chain disruptions, looking at, we talk war, natural disasters, other global crises. All these things can disrupt the supply chain, which has very much become globalized. So I think companies need to really diversify their suppliers, to assess their vulnerabilities, to have contingency plans in place. I'll give you a perfect example.
Yeah.
Real life example is, the Houthi rebels. I know this is getting a
Yeah.
little off topic, but the Houthi rebels in the Red Sea, right? They're attacking commercial ships in the Red Sea, and that's a major global shipping lane.
Yeah.
The Red Sea to the Suez Canal and up into the Mediterranean. And those disruptions have forced these ships to go all the way around Africa, causing all kinds of delays, causing greatly increased costs.
Costs. Yep.
Those are all things that you really have to pay attention to. So those are just a few that are off the top of my head, but there's certainly
Yep.
a lot of things that people should be paying attention to. Nothing. It does sound a little overwhelming, but things don't operate in a vacuum. So you really need to have an eye on the big picture.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is actually becoming such an overarching factor, sort of supply chain risk reduction and making sure that we're focused on adding in these additional cost factors and time constraints when trying to get product to market.
Exactly
When we're
right.
talking about products and markets, is your sector experiencing any kind of expansions or transformations or specific growth areas, technologies, product categories, regions? We were just talking about regions. So what about that? Where's the new or the energizing? What's new on the horizon there?
So I think certainly with regard to technology, I think there's been a lot of attention being paid right now to AI technologies. And companies, they really do have the ability to revolutionize the cosmetics industry, making it more consumer centric and sustainable. And there's a lot of examples of how AI is currently doing that. And I'll give you some examples of that. Product development, right? AI is being used in product development to optimize existing formulas, or to customize a cosmetic to a specific individual's needs and characteristics. There's things like virtual try-ons. You may have used these yourself, but it allows customers, right, to virtually try on cosmetics like lipsticks and eyeshadows before they actually go and purchase them. So it enhances their online shopping experience. Marketing and sales, right? There's targeted advertising that occurs in our industry, and how to deliver personalized recommendations to a consumer. All these types of things, virtual assistants and inventory management. I mean, there's a lot of different factors, or a lot of different areas that AI has really kind of helped to improve. And I think there's a lot of excitement in the companies with that regard, and how to optimize that. And I think everybody's still getting their arms around that. It's pretty nascent as far as the technology goes, but it's something that people are very much paying attention to.
That's really exciting. And so just following on from that, is that something that PCPC is doing some work in, or is it discussions that you're facilitating, or is it sort of the association's learning from the trials of the member companies?
So it's because it tends to be more company specific, and a lot of the things that it's optimizing or helping to improve tend to be things that they don't necessarily want shared out, proprietary in many respects. But it's important for us, I think, to help to educate our membership on what is out there and what is available, bringing in speakers and doing webinars and really trying to educate. And as they say, rising tide raises all boats, or that's the saying. And so the idea is to try to keep everybody educated on that. And so we are paying attention to the new technologies as they come available, and trying to keep our membership educated on it. And that's not to say there's not concerns about it too. I mean, there's certainly cybersecurity threats, with as you become more reliant on digital technologies, companies become vulnerable to cyber threats. So making sure that you have these kind of robust security measures in place is going to be important. And then just one that I was actually just reading about recently is, there's something, it's information privacy. So companies are people that are utilizing these try-on technologies, or you're collecting some type of biometric information from them, you have to make sure that you have protocols in place to protect that, to get permissions to use that, things like that, or you could be subject to get, in fact, one of the larger areas of, or growing areas of litigation right now is on that very front, Biometric Information Privacy Act, which has been on the books for years, but it's only with the advent of AI that we've seen an uptick in litigation. So anyway, that's just some, there's certainly some watch out. There's a lot of promise there, but there's going to be some watch outs as well.
So fascinating, and so fascinating to see how it comes together with, just sort of consumer behaviors and what's drawing consumers in. So talking about consumers, so in addition to AI, are there other types of consumer preferences or demand shifts? What's happening there, and what's going on with businesses adapting to new trends? And what are some of the new trends?
Well, I can certainly tell you, and some of the trends that we're seeing, there's been a noticeable shift among consumers. Maybe it's more of a growing shift, but it's with consumers' preference for things like natural and organic products.
Okay.
It's a major area of increased sales growth for us. Similarly, there's a growing popularity around vegan-friendly products and ingredients. Even halal ingredients have become, they're seeing a growth in popularity, less so than the other areas, but nevertheless, and with, even with the vegans, like I have my wife and daughter, oldest daughter, are both vegan, which makes for some interesting dinner conversations. But, I would think that they would tell you, and have told me, that, it is about ethical reasons, yes, but it's also what they consider to be health benefits. They think that plant-based ingredients and, antioxidant rich botanicals and things like that protect the skins and do all these, that these are things that they're more, as consumers, are more interested in, and they look for products like that. So they feel that it's meeting their needs to see natural, organic, and vegan and sustainable products that are sustainable. They're very focused on sustainability. And really, they want the companies that they patronize to support and reflect their ethos with regard to that. So a lot of them are just, as they prioritize environmental impacts and social issues and economic values, there's a lot of things that fall under that sustainability umbrella. But it's all things that our companies are trying to respond to because they see those, frankly, as growth areas.
Yeah. Well, coming from representing the specialty chemical sector, the emphasis around natural, organic, plant-based, some of our members are very much involved in that. Others are not. So that, of course, would have an impact on the specialty chemical sector. But do you see other trends or developments that, as SOCMA's membership, the specialty chemical sector, we should be thinking about as it relates to beauty care, cosmetics, personal care items? Are other trends that we should have our members, the SOCMA membership, be alerted to?
So I think, as I mentioned, those areas are certainly growth areas, but certainly the traditional ingredients and traditional products are still going to be very popular as well. Ones that are not necessarily natural, organic, or vegan, and so forth. So those are still going to be very large areas. But I was just pointing out trends. Yep. But nevertheless, yes, I think that consumers, they're thinking about cosmetics, I think, in the overall scope of like health and wellness, and look for some kind of multi-dimensional type of product. So so I think there's an appeal to products that market that way. And so I know companies are going to be sensitive to that and trying to deal with that, even as we're hearing, frankly, from consumers about things like, sustainable sourcing and reduced packaging and biodegradability and all these different, there's a very overarching concern about the environment and sustainable approach to things. So I think companies are going to remain focused on that. Now, more directly to your question, I think that, at least for our sector, I think we're going to see a major projected growth in things like skincare and hair care for 2024. One interesting thing that, and skincare, I think, is going to be a particular growth area. There's a greater awareness, I think, among consumers of things like the skin microbiome and its importance and things like that. The skin, it's similar to like, the gut, which has its own kind of unique ecosystem with a lot of bacteria and fungus and viruses and things like that make up the microbiota. And, we've long known about those kind of health benefits of making sure the balance, the gut microbiome and so forth. And so when it comes to skincare, it's very similar. And I think people are becoming more in tune to this. Anyway, all that to say, I think this health and wellness approach and a focus on skincare and hair care is going to be large. One interesting, one interesting area I think companies are just beginning to explore is this idea of ingestible cosmetics.
Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, and so I think that, again, this is something that's very new because I think I'm not sure that FDA would necessarily classify something ingestible as a cosmetic. They probably look at it as a supplement.
Sure, yeah.
Separately. But there may be, I know that companies, at least our companies, are looking at this idea of ingestible cosmetics, something that you could consume that would have cosmetic benefits for an individual. So again, very much in its nascent stage, but something to be thinking about. Same with injectable cosmetics. There's a thought around, in that area. So you're not going to see things on the market quite yet, or not much, other than some very small niche things. But I think that companies are going to want to be looking at that and potentially investing in some R&D there, because those have the potential to be large growth areas too.
So interesting.
Yeah, and I think that when as we talk about this, and something that we're seeing a lot more of. I talked before about the enactment of MOCRA, the cosmetics federal legislation.
Right.
The fact that it provided all this. One thing that it does not do, though, is preempt states from doing their own thing with regard to ingredients. I'm sure your members are very well aware that states institute chemical bans all the time. And so that's something that we face specific to the cosmetics industry. Last year, we saw bills in California that were enacted, Washington, Maryland. There's been a number of Maine, and it's not, PFAS has been, the big kind of
overarching chemical
life, right? That kind of took on its own life. I remember first hearing about it and people saying, "Oh, it's these two chemicals," and then it became, 3,000. Then it was 6,000 and 9,000. I'm like, okay, well, anyway, there's these bans that go into place though and some of them, can impact widely used ingredients in cosmetics. So they're very problematic, and one of the things that folks should really keep an eye on, because even just this year, we've already seen reintroduced in Maine another cosmetic ingredient ban bill, which we've already gotten pared down from a dozen to I think 4 ingredients or 4 chemicals. But yet, these are the kind of things that we're going to continue to see. So it's really important for people to be aware of it and to, states don't always listen to the safety and science of arguments, as you, I'm sure, well know, but it's important to continue to get that message out there.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so you have a ton of really interesting and innovative things coming down the pike, both for the association and for the sector. And one of the things I want to end on is a little bit about the mood and the outlook. So when I worked at Fragrance, as you know, we used to talk about correlations between consumer behaviors and the state of the economy. And so an example was that when things were less certain and consumers were looking for some type of comfort, they would look to floral scents. But when things were kind of hitting on all cylinders, they would be into more bold, those bold scents. So Is there something like that in the cosmetic sector as well? What's the outlook for 2024? Is it up, down, flat? What's coming up, would you say, for this coming year or the next 2 years maybe?
Well, so yes, so I'll start with the second part of your question first, and that is
Okay,
that the outlook for the sector is very promising.
great.
The current, according to reports now anyway, the current global beauty and personal care product globally, the market size is estimated to be about somewhere in the neighborhood of $530 billion for 2022.
22. Okay.
And that is grown, I think, and is expected to grow the compound annual growth rate, which they expected to be anywhere from 6 to 7, even though closer to 8% from 2023 to 2030. So that means that the growth of the industry, yeah, I mean, if you're doing the math, that's north of $900 billion by 2030 for the industry. So it's a huge growth area. And a lot of that growth is, driven by the rising consciousness of consumers about their appearance and interest in self-care. And, our products happen to be an integral part of that. And especially among younger people and male consumers too.
Yeah, that's true.
Men have become focused on their skin care and their grooming. So, we're seeing a lot more than that. As someone that, for many years, it was always soap and water for me. But, since I started working here, I've realized the benefits of many of the products that we use. So I'm a perfect target audience. But yes, I think that, correlating with, I look back at like the pandemic, and during the pandemic, there was I think less people were buying products like lipsticks and eyeliners. They weren't going into work as much. They weren't, so there was a downturn in certain areas, but there was a massive growth in other areas where it was more about the skincare and, things like that. So, different sectors tend to react differently. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the question here, the projected growth rate for this industry is pretty impressive for the coming years. So there's a lot happening. I think again, with the introduction of different types of ingredients, natural and organic and other things, these are all going to boost the market growth, and just a general awareness. As I said, I think consumers, personally, I think consumers are going to be very increasingly invested in companies that reflect their own mindset and ethos. And so I think that's going to drive a lot of our companies and how they develop and market their products.
Wonderful. Tom, this has been a great conversation. I'm so excited for you. There's so much exciting growth ahead for the sector, ahead for you, for the PCPC staff. Congratulations, my friend. I'm really thrilled for you, and we need to check back with you and see how all these new innovations, especially the AI stuff, is all going to shake out. Very fascinating.
Yeah, there's some really interesting things going on, and I would certainly welcome checking back in and doing this all again. So let me know.
Will do. Thanks for joining me today, and congratulations. Have a wonderful 2024.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. I hope to see you back here for our next one. In the meantime, check out SOCMA.org or our LinkedIn feed for links to other podcasts and SOCMA programs.